Well, Dr. Tony Ryan is an education futurist. He has worked with over 1,000 businesses and colleges in 12 countries on developing their future pathways. He is the author of The Thinker's Keys, The Ripple Effect, Mind Links, Wrapped in Living, and a series of manuals and workbooks that stimulate innovative thinking. They just don't seem to stimulate the person trying to read the words. His latest book, The Next Generation, was recently released by Wiley & Sons Publishers, and as part of the promotion for this book, he has appeared twice on national TV and in numerous radio and newspaper interviews. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please put your hands together for Dr. Tony Ryan.
Thanks, David. Well, folks, good morning. Congratulations on making it out of bed this morning. Always a good start to the day. Can I please begin also by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which this session is being held, and acknowledge Auntie Marg as well. Not many people have ever heard of the Faroe Islands. And before I dive further into this one, can I check if you can hear that comfortably at the back there? Can you hear me speak? If I'm not using the mic, can you hear me just as clearly?
Oh, no.
Okay, a couple of years ago, I had to fly from Denmark over to Iceland, in those days when we actually got into aeroplanes. And I flew over these Faroe Islands. Now, the reason I mention them to you is this. Back in March, when their tourist industry collapsed, they came up with a rather interesting idea. And the idea was this. They got locals to wear GoPros, and you could actually tag into that and follow them around. And if you wanted to, you could give them instructions on where to walk. And people all over the world tagged into it. And I love the thinking. So what I'm going to propose here this morning, amongst other things, that in terms of these rather interesting times, one of the ways out and through is going to be to generate different ideas. We can never be short of them. And then there's that fabled word, pivot. You've probably never heard of it before, but it means you've got to actually start to think a little bit differently. So I'm going to actually offer all sorts of ideas in terms of that. Before I do, a whole bit on trying to predict the future. That's my work up to a point. I tend to cruise online with a lot of places around the world and talk about what's coming up ahead. Can I tell you now, there are 3 ways of looking at what is coming up ahead. The first is this. You can't predict it. It's totally chance. That's Gold Lotto this Saturday night, for example. Please don't ask me what the numbers are. I have no idea. Here's the second way of looking at the future. Sometimes you can actually predict it. We call it predictive analysis. So I can tell you, for example, how many 10-year-olds there will be in this suburb in 5 years from now. I've just got to count the number of 5-year-olds there, and do a little bit of cross-referencing and working out growth and change, and you can pretty well work it out. There's a lot of things you can predict. I can tell you there will be a major solar eclipse on May the 20th in the year 2050. So there are things you can predict to some degree. One aspect of this that I love is what is called scenario planning. We're going to have a bit of a look at that one. So that's the second way you can predict the future. Here's the third way. You actually can, by creating it right now. Now some people go, well, you're being a little bit Pollyanna there, okay, saying you can't predict the future. I can guarantee you can. So for example, who in this room makes the effort to stay fit and healthy? You know, working on the premise that in 10 years from now, you'll still be running around all fit and healthy.
I've seen you.
I know it's a bit obvious, except it's true. Up to a point, you can predict the future. Can I tell you now, there's some things you can't change about what's happening right now, but there's some things you can. One of my real concerns is that we are losing confidence in our communities. People are so down because they watch the news 22 hours a day and they actually think that the world's all about to die. Now, it's a serious scene going on out there. However, can I point out that at the moment, the percentage of people on this planet who've died from this virus is 0.00008. Now, could it get worse? Absolutely. Do we need to stay serious about it? Absolutely. I'm just saying the whole world hasn't died yet. So we need to work out ways we can do something about what's going on. So I'll throw in some ideas on that. Now I'm going to go as deep and as meaningful as I will in this session here this morning. I will leave you the link to these slides if you love doing extra reading on things. Can I tell you now that this one's worth a read? It's just a 3-minute article. And they're claiming there are 3 factors that are going to impact upon any sort of business over the next couple of years on this planet. One is how long this thing goes on for. Pretty obvious, is it not? If it's 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, that will actually impact very strongly. The best we can work out at the moment with the immunologists is that there's about an 80 to 85% chance of different viruses coming through, probably mid-next year. But that's only an 80 to 85% chance. That's the first time in human history it's been done, in less than 5 years. The second factor is the whole mindset in terms of how people feel about all of this, regardless of what happens with the first one. The third one is how much we're prepared to adopt all the digital technologies. Now, if you love to just be in real life with people, I can tell you now that's lovely, but you're going to also need to work out how to be online, almost without exception. So that article there talks about those. This other article here talks about what are called scenarios. Now, bear with me here. Don't bother looking at the top part. If you can see the bottom part, here is how scenarios work. In your own life, you could possibly work out 4 scenarios for the rest of your life, from worst case to best case. So worst could be that you have a serious accident, get very ill or whatever. The best case is you stay fit and healthy and you are productive and you have a great time. Then you put another couple in the middle. So you describe quite accurately what they would be, and then you start to watch for the indicators that one of those is going to appear. And then you can plan accordingly. Now with this particular one here, their claim is that we need to do this. You have to come up with 2 determinants that will affect your particular industry, or your life if you wish. So in this one here, on the left side, they've got the economy, which will link in with whether the COVID-19 scene keeps going. And at the bottom is where it does prolong, and at the top is where we come rebounding back again. Now along the top, they've got one on social trust. From the left side, where there isn't much, and people start to develop enclaves and they couldn't care less about connecting with other countries and supporting each other, to the top right, where they actually do all the time. So you end up with 4 scenarios within that. The bottom left one is not going to be a good case. It's where things prolong and people start to distrust each other and they don't get online and work out how to connect with each other well. The top right will be fantastic. It's where we tap into who we really are in our humanity, and we also have a good economy coming back. So the idea is this: you write out the 4 descriptions, you then work out what the indicators would be that one is coming through, and then you work out what you would do when you saw those indicators appearing. That's probably as close as we can get to actually predicting the future. So, scenario planning. That's as deep and meaningful as I'm going to get here this morning. I could show you all sorts of graphs in terms of what's coming up and what's happening right now as well. You've all seen them. Over the last 10 years, since GFC, generally upward trends and then the big plunge. Have a look at this particular one here though. Notice that the determinants on the side don't start at 0. They start at 80 and they go up from there. Be aware of people who will do this to you in terms of graphs. So they'll actually make things look worse than they perhaps really are. There's a lot to be said for being aware of that, very much so, because visual impact is very, very important. Regardless though, definitely employment and hours worked have actually hit badly in Australia with about 30% of the population. Another 30% perhaps are doing okay, and then another 40% sometimes are doing even better. So it's not all bad news all around. Can I take this one further in terms of the scenarios? This book came out a month ago and it's really interesting in terms of what's happening on the planet right now. A Dutch guy, Rutger Bregman, and he's talking about humans are more kind than most people think they are. So for example, those people who love to sit at garden parties and carry on about how horrible the world is need to have a rethink on it all. This is actually the safest time in human history. It's the longest gap we've ever had since a major world war. This guy talked about how in the last 50 years we've had 700 major events on the planet that have been negative in terms of, floods, earthquakes and so on, and in every one of them without exception, people came from everywhere to help. They support continually, which is what I love about the stuff that a lot of you do. Okay, you're always giving support to other people, and that's coming through with this right now. So we see things like this building up. I would love to see more of this being created around the planet. Anyone familiar with this app called Be My Eyes? Okay, it's a free app. It was developed for people who are either blind or sight impaired. So there are two groups that are involved with it. One group are the people who are sight impaired and they download it. And then they've got about 2 million volunteers who will actually help them at any stage. So if someone around the corner there is trying to get the milk out of their fridge and they've got 5% vision and they can't see the use-by date on it, they just turn on their phone, they get to this app and they hold it over the, the milk dates. It automatically goes and finds one of those 2 million people who's available, who has a look at the video, the screen on their camera, and says, you'll find it's September 10th. Isn't that brilliant? Wow. So when people need to sign something or they need to walk through a shopping centre and they can't see it properly, they actually have that support. So that sort of thing is going on all the time. It's called Be My Eyes. You could get into it and volunteer right away. I know quite a few people who have. So you're going to find that I'm not Pollyanna, but I'm pretty optimistic about stuff. We've been through worse than this before. We'll come back. We need to look a bit more at what is going on that's actually good at the moment. So here's one for you. If you can see the address at the top there, Future Crunch /coronavirus, and the crunch is crun.ch. What they do here is this. Each week they put out an outline of some good news that's been happening in the previous week. Now, I hardly ever see any of this. So, for example, most of the rates in Europe are dropping dramatically, but hardly anyone mentions that at all. All they talk about is the US and Brazil and India saying it's just horrendous, is it not? Though we need to have a look at all the good things that are going on as well. I've decided, for example, not to watch the news all the time, because if I do, I just go downhill. I just get more and more worried all the time. So can I challenge you openly to set up something on your phone, perhaps an app that taps into some of the good news, and when you're reading the news over breakfast, don't just read the lousy stuff, also read some of the good things that are being done, that actually show how amazing human nature is. So, here's one of the ways to respond to all of this. Start to think quite differently. I was walking down a side alley in Hong Kong a couple of years ago, and I saw this magazine advertisement, and it just cracked me up. Think outside the dodecahedron. Now, in case you don't know what that is, that's like a 12-sided polygon. I reckon the square is so 20th century. We need to think outside the dodecahedron, and I'm seeing people doing that everywhere. So, for example, these two schoolboys in Brisbane back in April actually worked out that because everyone was going to be staying at home for a while, they'd all want to play board games. So overnight they set up a website, they worked out their sources so they could actually get hold of enough games to actually sell them, and they turned over $70,000 in 1 month. As compared to people who are going, isn't the world awful, it's horrible, they simply look for opportunities. There's always opportunities out there, always. When I travel to poor countries around the planet, much poorer than ours, I almost laugh when I notice what happens with the people who are selling things on street corners depending on the weather. So on days that it's really sunny, they're selling water. And then if the rain comes over, the next day I see the same person selling umbrellas. They just adjust all the time. There's always opportunities out there. You've just got to have that stimulus inside your head to actually come up with them. Here's just a range of ideas I've seen in the last couple of months. This t-shirt company came up with a design that you'll be able to use when finally you begin travelling again and you can't speak different languages. It just has a lot of icons on it. So when you want to say, I need to find the toilet, you just push to that one there. When you want to find something to eat, you push to that one there. People are into icons, except it's just such a simple thing. They've sold tens of thousands of them. People love them. How about this one? This 14-year-old in the States comes up with this idea in terms of using printer ink, and he finds that the different fonts use different amounts. So if you use Garamond, according to his analysis, you actually save a lot of printer ink. Now, printer ink is more expensive than Chanel No. 5. It's really expensive. So he calculates that if the US government actually used only Garamond in all of its public service, they'd save nearly $400 million a year in printer ink. Who the heck thinks of things like this? I love the thinking though, it's just fantastic. See the word pivot there? I know it's been done to death and back again, and yet when people hear it, they go, oh, I know, someone else needs to do something about that. Well, actually, if you are struggling with things, you need to do it yourself. So like alcoholic companies, working out they can make sanitizer instead of just alcohol all the time. How about this one in Spain that I quite liked? An interior decorating company that used to have these metal curtains hanging down have found that restaurants and cafes that are still operational love them for setting up the demarcation between groups, and yet it doesn't impact upon them like a solid brick wall, so they can still see other people, but they clearly know where the divisions are, and they're making an absolute fortune out of them. Let me see, what else have I got? The obvious one in terms of face shields and recycling companies. And goodness me, aren't people getting creative in terms of face shields with all sorts of amazing ideas, like this Japanese one that has worked out how to set up a translation device inside the face mask, and it can translate what you say into 8 different languages. Or in the States, Open Table is like an app you can use to actually sign into restaurants, but when the restaurant trade started to die down, they pivoted into you being able to sign up to go to a supermarket instead, because they had to restrict the number of people at any one time in a supermarket. Okay, it's adjusting all the time. There's so many ideas around. A bakery in California that adjusted to creating home bread making kits because they found that people everywhere wanted to work out how to make their own. And they just sold tens of thousands of them. See, it's pivoting all the time. Now, the ideas are all very well, except at some stage you've got to put them into practice. I cannot recommend highly enough a concept called design thinking. Design thinking is just majestic. And it's where you go from start to finish in terms of an idea and putting it into place. So here's how it works. Let me see. I heard of a 14-year-old girl over around Sanford, and apparently she has a weekend market where she sells some greeting cards. And she makes an absolute fortune out of them because she used design thinking to develop them. So here's how it worked. You start by empathising with the group you're going to be selling to or giving support or service to. Now, she was sitting around at a party on a Saturday night where her mother and her friends were getting too drunk, and they were all complaining about how they could never find the sort of greeting cards they really wanted. So she actually then empathised with them, going, oh, that's awful, how does that make you feel? And they go, it's just such a waste of time, you know, we just can't find the card we really need. So the next morning she defined with a couple of them the sort of card they'd really like. Then she went away and she ideated, fancy word for brainstorming, and she came up with some different designs in terms of, you know, they could be made. She then borrowed $100 from her father and went off to a local printer and got some prototypes made of these cards. She then went and tested those cards on those same women who were at the party, this time when they're sober, and got a whole lot of feedback from them. She then defined further what she needed, came up with more ideas, more prototypes, and then put them into place. She did a market research at the age of 14. She's 14. You're 40.
Yeah. So you are?
I'm sure she's got a greeting card for that.
She's certainly got a message.
Oh, I'm really happy for you, Beck.
Thank you. Me too.
The concept of design thinking. 5 steps, really worth looking at. I've actually seen school kids do this with 3D printers when they're designing cutlery for people with arthritis. So they actually went out and they actually sat with people in their mid-80s who were having a lot of trouble holding on to cutlery, saying, so how does that feel? What could you do differently? So then they defined back at their school what sort of cutlery could actually work with this. And then they came up with lots of ideas and they made prototypes on their 3D printer that actually had things like big thumb holes in them so they could actually put a thumb in easily so it didn't shake as much. Then they went back to those same people and tested them on them and got feedback from them, then went away and adjusted them again. If I had my wish, it would be that every kid in Australia by the age of 15 knew how to do this sort of stuff. It would revolutionise this country. It almost hurts me when I actually see us hold back from what we could really be in this country. We could just be astonishing, could we not? It is just the most amazing place. It really is. If you want lots of ideas in terms of doing this sort of thing, amongst other things, I've written some material called Thinker's Keys. Okay, so I came up with 20 strategies that I reckon every person of every age needs in terms of being able to think well. If you go into thinkerskeys.com, you'll just find heaps of stuff there. I've got short videos explaining each one of them. I've got all sorts of activities. And can I tell you now, if you've got anyone younger than 40 at your house, you need to really get them into it. We talk about what are called capabilities for people as we go into the future. A capability is something that makes you more capable of coping with whatever is going on up there. Can I tell you now, one of the biggest capabilities is being able to think, to actually come up with new ideas and then put them into place. So if you want a whole lot of ideas like that, just go for there. Here's one of them. I'll take a bit of a risk here in terms of you having a go at things. In a minute I'm going to ask you to jump into pairs or threes. keeping some degree of social distance. And I'm going to ask if you wouldn't mind having a go at this. This is one of the thinker's keys. I call it the combinations key. So it goes like this. When you want to develop a new idea, such as, for example, new versions of laptops or printers, you come up with something that's got sweet nothing to do with them, like pencils or chocolates. Then you sit down and you try and combine those two in some way. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to come up with some new marketing ideas for one of you in terms of what you do. So I'm going to ask you if you can please use paper clips to generate those ideas. Now, you may not actually use paper clips. You might use something that stimulates you in terms of paper clips, like the curve on things or the metal that's used, thin metal. It's going to be entirely up to you. So bear with me here. Pairs or threes, no fours or fives. Pairs or threes, decide on what you're going to market, and then you can only use somehow paper clips to generate some ideas on how to do that marketing. Okay, you've got 90 seconds. See how you go.
Everybody loses the tool to change the SIM card in their phone. So we're now selling a special paper clip that is foldable, so you can pop the SIM card out of your phone. And we're going to package it because we're working on the unboxing model of Apple. So it's going to be gold-plated paper clip in special packaging promoted to the gift tray for the purpose of supplying to some people things that everyone's already got an answer to. Now here's something you haven't got, and it's the universal paper clip that's used to take the SIM card out of your phone. Done.
Okay, 30 seconds.
You can, clips in there. Because no.
Okay, 20 seconds.
You can use it for breaking into houses as well. We're done.
Okay, 10 seconds. Okay, legends, wherever you're up to there. Is there anyone who is so totally proud of their idea they're just bursting to tell us what it is in 10 seconds or less? What do you got?
Everybody loses the tool they use to get the SIM card out of their phone. So what we've got is we actually grabbed the paper clip, we've gold-plated the paper clips, we've packaged it in an unboxing like Apple do, and we do it as a promotional gift for the person who has everything, and now they get the flexible gold-plated paper clip, which is used to remove the SIM card, but it also has a keyring clip, so you can also use it to break and enter into houses.
Freud would have a field day with you. That's great, that's great. Anyway, that's the start of it all. There are so many ways of generating ideas. That's one of the simplest ones. Often people just go online and find a dictionary and they find a random word. They just use that to generate the ideas. Sounds silly? Perhaps. See what happens sometimes. As I'm starting to wrap up here, in that Thinker's Keys, I've also got a blog I call Beautiful Ideas. So now and again when I see something that just blows my mind, I'll put it into there. So if you want to have a look at that as well, you are very welcome. There was one there I found recently called Defeat by Tweet. So for fundraising in the States building up to the elections over there, they've set it up so that every time Trump tweets something, you pay a few cents to a charity. So and they're charities he doesn't like. So every time he tweets, it's like millions of dollars are going to different charities. I love the twist in the thinking. That is so cool. Just saying there's lots of ideas out there. So if you want to, spend 5 minutes going through those, you'll see what I mean. And can I also ask about this whole dynamic at the moment in Australia in terms of the kids? I reckon we need to give this serious consideration. Partly because the under and unemployment rate for 15 to 24-year-olds is at least twice the adult rate. Okay, sometimes it's 3 times in some parts of the country. We need to get a life in terms of this one because we're setting up those kids for failure in terms of life. I don't care what anyone says about how schooling and life is about just living a full, existence and work doesn't matter. Actually, work does matter. Work gives you some degree of sense of security in terms of who you are in society. We're going to have to rethink work though. There's not enough work for everyone. There never will be again. We're going to have to see work as community service and helping people in our family as well. I reckon we need social contracts. I've seen this around Australia over the last 15 years or so. I saw one in Wollongong about 10 years ago, and it's where they will say to school leavers, we will guarantee you 6 months of employment in the community as long as you don't commit any crime while you're at school, and there's a few other criteria for it. I reckon there's about 20 of these social contracts going on around Australia. So then we get everyone who's in business in an area to agree that they will contribute a certain amount of time and expense to actually supporting the young people. Just saying. Can I tell you now, we need to actually also look at the demographics of Australia over the next 10 years. The birth rate is dropping very significantly. It's already only 1.8 births per woman in Australia. It's going to go down to about 1.4. So contrary to belief, people aren't having more experiences where they create babies in this time. They're actually having less. That has massive implications for the country over the next 10 years, if not 50. That's why we're going to have to get back to migration sometime soon. I feel sorry for any politician. I wouldn't want to be a politician at this stage because they are just very difficult decisions to make. You know, keep everyone clean and healthy, and yet we're going to drop if we don't have that money coming in from overseas. And we get that money in two ways. One is online, which is why I want you to be online, if at all possible. And the other one is, of course, real people coming in and spending that money. Money is just like, you know, some people say money is evil, and I say get over it. The greed for money is evil. Money itself is fine, and we need that lifeblood to keep a community going. So we're going to have to work out how to maintain that migration rate. 80,000 houses or constructions are done each year because of that migration rate. That's going to drop immediately, of course. And there are so many other industries that suffer because of it. Obviously, tourism. I hinted before that kids are going to need capabilities, so do we. We're going to need these sorts of things. Initiative. There's a fancy one there, adaptive agility. It basically means you can cope with anything that changes and adjusts. You're going to need it. Unfortunately, as you get older, chronologically gifted, does that describe you?
No, I'm gifted. Yes, gifted describes me. Yes.
We're going to need to be adaptive with that agility. Very important scene. Entrepreneurship, we need everyone to be an entrepreneur. Everyone without exception in their lives. And especially that with kids too. Look, as I am finishing up here, I love the X Prize. Anyone ever seen this? We need more incentives like this around the world. It's at xprize.com. If you can find 5 minutes, have a quick look at it. It is the best stimulus project on the planet. A scientist in America set it up about 8 years ago, and he finds friends with lots of money who will set it up as an incentive to come up with new ideas on things. The ideas are brilliant. They're just brilliant. They're like right out there. Gulf of Mexico with the oil about 7 years ago, they set up a $2 million prize for someone who can work out how to clear the oil up more rapidly than normal. 4 young guys in Holland came up with a system that improved the speed by 400% over anything previously in existence. It's just got so many different prizes in it. Now we need local ones, and maybe not money, but some different incentive. Like, I don't know, with schools we could have something where we promise an hour with Richard Branson the next time he comes to town. If they come up with an idea on how to minimise the impact of homelessness in their local community. I want kids onto this stuff in a big, big way. If I had another wish, it would be guys like this here to actually sit in teams and resolve world problems, because it's their world up ahead. They may as well. Can I point this out as well? In the last month or so, the mayors representing about 750 million people on this planet have said, there's no way around this. We have to rethink the way we live life. We cannot go back to the old normal. It's a new normal that pays respect to the environment, takes into account the way that we've got so many haves and have-nots on the planet. We need to do it differently, and they're seriously discussing this. And that's again why you come into all of this. You need to take that into account too. Here's one thing we need to do. This is my veranda, about 10 minutes from here. I look at it and lots of lights and trees, and I've got this set of ears there. And I put that there to remind myself that when I'm talking with people I have around that table, I need to use 2 ears and 1 mouth in that ratio. Now, can I say that one of the ways we're going to get through this is the talk we do every day? And we're all the way from hopeless to hopeful. So the hopeless is when we go, oh, I watch all that news and it's just so depressing, as compared to saying, you know, I've developed a news feed myself of optimistic news. Okay, they're going from there to there. Where are you with your language each day? Do you actually join the crowd? Do you join the sheep and just keep talking about how awful it is, or do you start talking about what you can do about it? You know, down where it says the numbers are scary, you need to work out what the numbers really are. You know, like if we go on the number of people who've died in Australia, we'd need to fill Suncorp Stadium 3 times, and then there'd be one person out of that crowd, those 3 crowds. Could it get worse? Absolutely. Am I wanting to pay respect to anyone who's died? It's a total tragedy, every death. I'm telling you now, the numbers though say something else. They're worth looking at. Learning new stuff overwhelms me as compared to, I want to get into it. The language is really going to matter. One of my consultancy arms is on generating ideas. So if you wanted to take that further with me sometime, please get back to me. I often have 90-minute provocations with groups or half-day workshops or 2-day ones that I go into a lot more detail on these. Here's my last thought just for now. I love it when people say, oh, things are going to be different, better up ahead. Oh, I'm going to get fit and healthy next year. Anyone ever been at a New Year's Eve party where someone's on their 10th drink and they say, I'm going to get fit and healthy next year? And then on January 1 they don't because they're too hungover. January 2 they don't because they don't want to break the pattern from the first day. It all comes down to the stuff you do each day. You know, you will never change your work or your life until you change stuff you do each day. There's the stark reality. There's the great secret of success. It's found in your daily routine. Now, in terms of the total wrap-up of time, here we are.
Questions on?
Yeah, got 5 minutes for questions.
Okay. Q&A. If you wish to ask questions, cool. Can we do this, please? Can I leave you for 60 seconds to work out one question at least you'd like to ask of me or the crowd in general, and then we'll have a quick sort of response to them, and then we'll wrap up. So, 60 seconds. What questions would you love to ask about this sort of stuff I've been talking about here this morning? Okay, 60 seconds. See, here you go.
What were you going to ask?
Okay, 30 seconds.
What are we doing?
Question.
What's a question you'd love to ask?
Question.
What are we doing?
Yeah, raise it.
Are you sure you want me to ask questions?
Okay, 10 seconds. Okay, folks, anyone like to ask something?
Oh, reluctantly. I had a question. At the beginning, you talked about the Faroe Islands.
Yes.
Okay, so they lost their tourism and they were walking around with GoPros on.
Yes.
So I'm interested as to how they generated income from that without people coming in.
Yep. They had a free version, they had a paid version.
Okay.
The free version was where you could just tag in and watch it while the local talked about it. The paid one was where you could actually control where they went. So if you wanted them to walk down to the left and go to the edge of that cliff, you could actually do that, and you paid accordingly.
So you had to pay for it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
Sometimes ideas don't always generate the income.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, clicks for cash, all that.
Yeah.
What do you got there?
You never want questions from me.
Is it a question?
Yeah, it's how you rationalise one of those issues you said about ideas. I worked with lots of organisations and I looked at a $5 million one that the UN did last year, which as soon as you look at it on paper you say this is just waste. We have precious resources. The concept you said about ideas, I see ideas come across my desk 100 a day. In fact, I got a text from one guy right now, just said, we're doing this, and I said, I will ring you about it because I won't put it in writing what I'm going to tell you. How do you differentiate in your ideas model the crap from the few diamonds that are lost? Because we've only got so much resource,
Yep.
and chasing crap is a waste of time.
Yep. Okay, that's another whole morning. And it is, partly because you need to set up criteria for particular ideas and the application. That's why you need that design thinking to work out how you're going to put it into place. Here's the thing. The first 1% is the inspiration. The other 99% is the perspiration. But you can't do the perspiration until you've done the inspiration. And we've actually got to come up with those ideas initially. We've got to be careful that we get so scared of coming up with new ideas we don't. Because we're worried that someone will give us a hard time about it, someone will, denigrate it, someone will just say, no, it's not going to work. So we have that climate of being able to come up with the new ideas, except then we need to go into the so-called left brain of the thinking on it and critically analyse the worth of it. And that's why it's worth having a big picture in terms of what you want to do right from the start as well. Anyway, that's only a very short version on that one, but it's actually a really good question. Yeah. Anyone else, just as we're wrapping up? Folks, I can't thank you enough for your time. I hope you have a great day. Remember, you count when it comes to how we create that future up ahead. It's that big. It could be amazing, and it's going to be tricky for a while, but it could still be amazing. I think it's going to be extraordinary. Thanks, gang.